Hello and welcome back to the worst Warmachine channel on the internet. I'm Malorian and this is Malorian Weekly. Now this is another topic coming to you from our content overlords and manipulators over there at Patreon. And what they voted on today was that we're going to be talking about non-symmetrical scenarios. Now what this is really all talking about when we get to it is what is symmetrical? Well, symmetrical is what you normally see, right? When you're going down onto a board and okay, there's this zone over here and this zone over there, and I have this flag here and you have that flag there. It's symmetrical, right? It doesn't matter what side you're on, it's exactly the same. That's symmetrical. So non-symmetrical would be the opposite of that. If I go and I flip this over on the table, it's not matching up the same way. It's different. And so what we're going to be talking about this is some different ways that you could be doing this, and then along the way talking about the benefits of actually looking into going into non-symmetrical scenarios. Now, I think the easiest one that we can first start with, which is not really even non-symmetrical, but it's adjacent, is diagonal deployment. Now this is something that Clash Machine was already playing with the idea on, and what you really see there is if you have your nice square mat that you're playing there, you got your scenario going across. If you fold it up and down, it is symmetrical, but now we're going to go ahead and go diagonal and say we're going the other way, and now all of a sudden when you fold it on that diagonal line, it's not symmetrical anymore. Now, I say that this is not really a true example because really, if you just like flipped it and did, okay, that's really all symmetrical, but it feels different, right? When you do that, you're like, oh, it's different now. I have these elements over here, but you have those elements over there. It's a little bit different in the way that this is going to be playing out. It's almost a little bit where you're playing one of those games where you have like the circle zone over here and the flags and the objectives over there. It is symmetrical, but not when you go the other way. And it just feels different, right? It's not something where, oh, I can deploy in the middle and kind of go as normal. It's like, whoa, left versus right flank are extremely different. And I have to be making some very educated choices for me to be successful in this scenario. So even though it's not really non-symmetrical when you really think about it, it gets you thinking about it. It feels different. It gets along the way that we're trying to be talking about. I think the next way that we could be talking about non-symmetrical scenarios would be something where they're very close to being symmetrical with just some slight differences. So let's imagine something like bunkers. In bunkers, there are flags down the middle. Each side are going to be having their rectile zone, their rectangle zone, and then there's an objective in the middle. Okay, that's nice and simple, but what if one side had a rectangle and the other side had a circle zone? It's really the same scenario where each of them have a scenario piece there, but the main thing is on one side, it's going to be scored by people that have, they're a lot more jacks and battle engines, but if you're a person that has more units, you probably want the other side with the circle. Of course, you could be talking about some other benefits where the circle would stick out more. Maybe there could be some other placements, things going on there, but you can understand the idea where largely the scenario layout is symmetrical, but the elements are changed to not be symmetrical so that there's a benefit to one side over the other. And I think the part here where in the last one, we were talking about the ideas of like, oh, I just can't deploy in the middle. Left versus right is important. I think the big learning that comes from when you're looking at this is that picking what side is important, right? All of a sudden, whereas very typically for years now, going first has been the absolute like, yeah, we got to be going first because that's just the way that this game works. Go, 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 get across, smash people, control the zone, score them anyway. But if you do things like this, well, going second now has this different advantage where, oh, I have more troops, so I want to be taking that side that's actually having a circle there. Or maybe I want to be saying something like, oh, you don't have any troops at all in order to score this. I'm going to trap you with this so that you don't have any good way of actually dealing with it. Now, I'm going to quickly go and fix this before we get any more little dings, but I think that's the next level of symmetry that we want to be talking about here. Now, once we start thinking about that and how like, okay, the elements are actually different, let's talk about the next idea where the actual like setup is very different. Let's say, for example, on one side, they're going to be having a rectangle and 2 objectives, and on the other side, they're going to be having a circle and 3 flags. Completely different. You fold that over, and it's not that as an element is different, everything is different, absolutely completely. It's really taking what we looked at to the last one, but pushing it up even more, right? Now it's not just a question of like, well, do I have units or battle engines or battle group, and what do they have? It's more so looking at the other pieces. Well, like, okay, do I have a lot of solos, so I want the flags? What about the objectives, right? Objectives could be something where I want to stick you with the objectives so I have more things to destroy, but then again, maybe they want the objectives. Maybe the way that the terrain is down has lots of, rubble and forest, and you need something that has Pathfinder, or maybe you have a lot of incorporeal, so they really want to get those magical attacks, or. And all of a sudden, there's a lot more of that thinking of what side do I want to be having for these different benefits. It's nuts. You can make this to be a little bit fair or unfair as you need it, which we'll be getting into in the next one, but at least there's more of that thought now. Like, do I want to go second because of literally what the scenario layout is on the table, that picking one side or the other gives me that advantage? Let's push this even farther, just a little bit further here, and talk about the idea of really making this interesting and making it more of like an attacker versus defender scenario. Now, this is something that back in my GW days, we saw all the time. Some of my favorite games I played are the ones where like one side actually starts with a castle and you have to defend the castle, and there's all the rules around that. That's fantastic. We have nothing like that in Warmachine. So I mean, I'm not saying we're going to be playing castles down. I think that's a little bit too far down. But what about the idea of attacker versus defender type scenarios? Let's imagine a world where only one side has scenario pieces. So maybe on one side, they have like a rectangle zone that's, maybe representing a bridge that they have to defend, or a gate or something like that. And then maybe there's a couple of flags on the outside, but it's only on one side of the board. And then maybe on the other side, maybe they have some objectives in order to give them those bonuses or something. But largely the things you need to get to and score are on the other side, where obvious then you need to get over there. The attacker is going to have to get across the board and get there to contest and get in there. Now, that is a more unfair symmetry going on here, or non-symmetry. So whereas I was talking about in the last one, you could be changing the elements or changing the pieces, but largely, like both sides of the board, it doesn't really matter which one you're on, you stand a pretty good chance where you could be standing there defensively or going offensively and play your normal first 1 to 5 points or 5 more points type of game. But in this case, it would be not fair. One side has all the scenario stuff, you're needing to attack to get there. So what if it's something where like the attacker starts with 3 control points or something like that to mitigate this? Again, this is all in the weeds. This is all the details. I just want to kind of open our minds to this idea of it, right? Because that's probably the first thing that will come up. If you say that, oh, all the elements are on one side, well, that's really no fair. They're just going to defend it. They're going to score it easily and they're going to win. Okay, well, there's ways to mitigate that. And then once we get rid of that one simple argument against it, you really start thinking about ways you could actually make this work. And again, I think the real advantage to this is the shakeup that you'd be feeling in this, right? Not only now are you needing to be trying to think about, okay, do I just want to go first all the time and go across? But now it's more of a thing like, oh man, like, okay, do I want to be the attacker? Do I want to be the defender? When I'm building my list, do I need to build my list so that I have to be thinking about whether I will be the attacker, right? It's no longer just one thing of like, okay, this is my core list, and this is a thing that kind of shores up all the negatives here. But if I know all of the different attacker and defender scenarios, well, I probably want one that's good at attacking, right? If I know that there is a good chance that I'll need to be getting across the board and going after them, I need something that's fast. I need something that can get up there and contest. I need something like that that can get up there and destroy, right? Or maybe I'm going to lean into the whole defender part. Maybe I'm going to make sure I'm in a theme that I get like +1s, rerolls to go first, and I'm going to go and I'm going to make this defender thing work. So I'm just going to make a whole list that's based around the defender that has all these units units that get in your way with high armor, medium infantry, whatever, right? Like this is something that also now is affecting list design, right? When you're starting to think about these scenarios and the way that you'd have to be trying to play into it. Now, all of this is supremely interesting and something that I think is really a place that we could go, right? We're in a spot right now where people are saying, we've been doing the same steamroller stuff for a long time. We need a shakeup. And I think this sort of like asymmetry is a way we could actually be going with this. Now, this has all been what I've been sharing with you so far, pretty linear in the way that the thought process goes. Let me give you one more that's a little bit even more different. That's kind of like an aside to this because it doesn't really fall in that linear stream. And this is the idea that there would be non-symmetrical scenarios because you are placing your own scenario elements. Imagine that. Imagine that whenever you go, there are no scenario elements on the table. Basically, you go there, there's the terrain, and you yourself, knowing your own list, have your own set of, flags and objectives and zones that you brought with you. And then based on what you're having there, well, you know what? I have a lot of units, so I'm going to be putting down these circles. I have a lot of battle engines and jacks and things like that. I'm going to be putting down these rectangles. Lots of solos, lots of circles, blah, 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 blah. We know what's going on. Now, there could be some different rules. Again, we're getting into the weeds and the details, but maybe there'd have to be rules about how far away from the edges they have to be. So you're not like putting the flags way on the back and stuff like this. And maybe it's even something where we place these and you can place them wherever you want on the board, knowing that you're going to be rolling for sides after the terrain is down. And now this is something where there's levels of benefits here to it, but one, it's something where the scenario is something that you actually build into your list and think like, okay, I'm going to be putting down these types of things. I know there'll be lots of flags because I'm placing down X flags here. I'm going to really go with these solos. It's now going to be very important or not important to go first. I mean, like all of a sudden with these, like picking sides and thus picking the scenario side is extremely important, right? And so it really helps balance these things as well. Now, this is also where I put on my TO hat, being like, oh boy, would I love this, because nothing is worse than as a TO wanting to sit down and enjoy and check out what's happening, but you can't because you're rushing around. Okay, that table's done. Quick, can you guys get your stuff out of the way? Because I got to set up the scenario on this table. Okay, you're done? Okay, please move your things. I got to set up this scenario. If I can just be like, you know what, you set up your own, that'd be perfect. And you might feel like, well, there's no real precedence for this, but there is. I mean, I think the largest one that got me thinking along these lines was when I was looking to X-Wing, because for them, they placed down their own terrain. And by the way, I think that could go here in Warmachine as well. But for that, I was like, wow, you could be doing that with your own scenario stuff, right? Where like you just walk in and be like, oh, I'm going to put this circle here. It has to be at least X inches away from the sides. And the other thing I picked was a flag, which I'll be putting over here. Maybe I'm picking all my stuff to being on one half because I want to kind of lock things down and help defend it. You're kind of making your own defensive scenario. But then again, maybe yes, maybe no, you're rolling for what side you are after. Again, that's something that's in the weeds, it's in the details, just something to consider. Those are all the scenarios that I want to present you with, that I want you to start thinking about. But do realize that this is probably something that we should be really considering seriously as a community. As I've said, for many years now, it's been the same thing over and over and over again. And one of the largest complaints I hear from people that leave our game is that it's just a game of circles, right? Circles and squares. There's no reason to this. There's nothing going on, no thought to it. Just like, oh, what do you know? There's a couple of circles going down there. And then they go to other games where there's more reason to what the scenario is. Like, oh, you gotta try and kill these key pieces. They're trying to whatever, right? And I don't think that all of them can completely translate over to Warmachine, but all of a sudden, if these things start changing so that you're now, picking a scenario, like in any way in that linear line I'm talking about, right? Where they're a little bit off for the elements. So you're picking the one that makes the sense to you when it's really very different. So now it has this like attacker defender feel, like all these things are things that I think would address some of these concerns. And then all of a sudden you have this feel like, like, why are you going after that? Well, I'm the attacker, right? Look, they have all these pieces and I'm trying to break into there. And that kind of feel adds something, right? It's one thing to say like it'll be adding it to the gameplay of, okay, you got to build this into list design, tactically, you got to think out how you're going to be defending or attacking this. But even just the way that you have that buy-in, right? The fact that you're now like, no, we're just not like some pieces wanting to stand in some cutout circles on the ground. There's a reason for it. You're defending this. I can now feel like you're defending a town or defending or whatever. We're not racing to get onto these same little pieces. So I feel that with all that together, and of course that other part there where I talked about like with my TO hat, where I'd love to see where you bring your own, because it just makes my job so much easier. But if we want to spice up, if we're looking forward to whether it's a Mark IV or whether we're looking forward to what the next Steamroller package or something like that, this is the type of thing we should start opening our minds to. We talked about that with Clash Machine, where there's a lot of interesting things in there, and I think the community's ready. I think the community for a long time has been locked down like, no, this is Steamroller. You only do it this way. And now we're ready for something new and something fresh. We have a new dev team. It's a new age. We're ready to move on to something interesting and fun. So there you go. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on non-symmetrical terrain. I'm sure a lot of you hate the idea. A lot of you, you just like the symmetry. Maybe it's just like almost like an OCD thing. You want it to be the same, or you just like the tradition of what Warmachine is supposed to be like. I would love to hear from you. Put your thoughts down below. And otherwise, I got to thank my patrons. Of course, this comes to you from my patrons. I hope I kept that list open so I can actually be thanking them. Of course I didn't, because I'm an idiot, and that's just the reason why I need my patrons, is because I'm just such an idiot that if I didn't have my patrons here to try and make this better, boy, it would just be an absolute mess. So a big thank you here going out to my overlords, Boyd and Darrell, also to my content manipulators, Adrian, Dorian, Jordan, and Sloth Monarchy. If you want to check out that link, it's down below, but otherwise, we'll catch you later. Bye.